help support my channel. I have merch with terrible dinosaur puns on it, and I also have a Patreon where I have giveaways every 4 months. Hey everyone, and today I'm collaborating with a Twitch streamer named ScopeOG. So he requested I make a Hyper Dilo, so I'm going to be using this miniZoo Dilo model. It's actually quite a nice model. So Hyper Dilo doesn't exist in the game of the Isles just yet, so I'm going to be using Tapwing, who's an official Isles artist. I'm going to be using her design, and yes, I have permission from her to do so. So first things first, the crest and the neck spikes have to be cut off. They're not going to work with this design. So I'm going to be using my scalpel to shave and cut those different parts off. I feel kind of bad cutting its crests off like this, but it has to be done. Now I'm going to super glue the mouth open because I want to show off the spitting effects later on. Now I'm using a little file to shave away all the letters and numbers. I don't really want them showing up on the belly after the sculpt is done. Okay, so now begins the sculpting. I'm going to be using my 2-part epoxy milliput, which is of course a 2-part clay that sets hard in 2 to 3 hours. So I usually work in small areas at a time. So here you can see that I'm using various different tools, mostly silicone and metal tools, and I'm using water to smooth it out and also water on the tools to stop the clay sticking from the tools rather than the model itself. I use milliput rather than super sculpey because milliput I don't need to stick in the oven and the oven risks melting the piece. That's been a question asked multiple times, why can't I use super sculpey when sculpting customs. It's mostly that reason, and also milliput is way stronger than super sculpey. So that's my reasoning there. So I am sculpting the crest on now, which Tapwing made this beautiful design where it looks like fungi growing out of the Dilophosaurus head, and it blocks out the eyes so it no longer has eyes by the looks. This creepy blind creature that has fungi growing out of its head. It's really cool looking. I love this design. But of course it's going to be amazing. It's Tapwing after all. She's an absolute phenomenal artist. That's enough of me fangirling. Back to sculpting. I'd also like to thank my lovely husband here for making this brand new music for us all to enjoy. He's got a new instrument and decided to make some more music for my channel, so thank you. Thank you. I love you so much. Okay, so it's time for question of the day, the first one of the day. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your favorite color of the alphabet? Carrots, I guess? I'm not too sure. Good question though. So now I've rolled some really thin bits of the milliput and I'm pushing it into the seam lines and joints just to disguise them and make it seamless with the model so you can't see that it was a previously moving jaw. And I'm going to use my various different tools to try and match the different textures and scale effects that the original sculptor used, just again to make it seamless and not noticeable once I paint it all. And I'm also pushing some clay into those areas that I sanded smooth where the letters were, if that makes sense, and I'm re-putting the scale effect in. So if you haven't checked out Scope's Twitch already, I highly recommend you do. He's a IELTS streamer mostly, and his videos are very informative and very entertaining. I really enjoy them. And I like to pretend I'm learning how to play the IELTS, but the information goes in one ear and out the other. Hopefully Scope can teach me something, but we'll see, we'll see. I'd like to also say thank you everyone. I have reached 4K on my YouTube. Thank you so much. I am very appreciative of that. I have been sitting on 300 followers for years, and then the last 6 months has just blown up for me, and now I'm at 4,000 followers, and that's just crazy to me. So thank you guys, thank you everyone, and thank you to all the amazing people who wanted to collab with me too. Like Scope, thank you. Thank you. So here you can see I'm using my pointy tool here to sculpt in the scales, and I'll be coming in with my silicone tool later to round those sort of scale areas to make them a bit more smoother. It's kind of hard to explain, and I'm not sure if I'm sculpting scales right, but it's my way of doing it. So now I've realised, looking at the design, that the Hyper Dilo that Tapwing designed actually has like a little split jaw with two really sharp vampire teeth. So I'm cutting off the end of the jaw and re-sculpting it on. I'm a little annoyed I didn't notice it in the beginning, but thankfully I did notice it before I finished painting. So I'm just sculpting it now and making some holes in for the vampire teeth to go in. And yes, they are very fragile, these teeth, until I seal them in resin later on, which makes them quite strong then. Still fragile, but less likely to be broken. And of course I'm following the textures of the body already used by the sculptor, and just to make my jaw more seamless with the body so it's not noticeable that it's a new addition to the sculpture. I really do hope this creature becomes an official creature, because I really want to see this thing in action. Just from its spitting net it does, its saliva net, and its smaller splitting jaw with the vampire teeth. I want to know what they do. I want to know. And I want to know if this thing's actually blind, so it has like hyper hearing or something. Come on, make this happen. I want to know more about this creature. It is so cool. So now I'm making little cheek fungi. I'm just going to call its face things fungi because it looks like fungi. It's so cool. So sculpting little cheek fungi in there before I proceed with the necks and back and tail scales, or crocodile scales as some people call them. I did deliberate on chopping off the tail and making it straight, but in the end I decided to keep it its weird bend curl it has, which I don't think the Dilo could actually do according to its skeleton. But anyway, I decided to keep it curled like that because the Tapwing's design sort of seems like it might be able to use its tail to whip and catch its prey by whipping. I don't know. Sort of in my head it makes sense. I don't know if it actually makes sense, and I don't know if that's what Tapwing has in mind for a creature, but to me it sort of made sense that it had also had a tail attack. So I know a bunch of you have been asking and practically screaming at me to make these various different unofficial hypos out there, and asking if I will make them or if I'm going to make them. My answer is, if it gets requested, like this one was requested by Scope, or if it gets voted for on my Instagram. So if you really want to see me make something, even if it's not Isles, like if it's Horizon Zero Dawn, or if it's Jurassic Park Alive, if you want to see me make something else, head over to my Instagram and keep an eye out for when I do my posts on voting. Because I usually do a vote and see what everyone's actually interested in making, and then I'll go make that when I actually have free time to make something that isn't a commission. But yes, I also do commissions. I just have been closed for a very long time because I am a very busy girl at the moment. But I hope to open soon. But again, I'll announce it on my Instagram. So if you want any of that info and want to be the first to know, Instagram is the place to follow. I'm most active on there. But yes, comment below, what is a hyper you would love to see to be made official? It doesn't have to be a Tapwing design. Just let me know below, what is a hyper design you like and you would like to see be made official? I'd like to see what hyper designs are out there. So now I'm starting the neck armor, or crocodile scales. I'm not sure what to call them. I like to call them armor. It's a very slow process sculpting all this back armor on. All the hypos seem to have them, and they do look very crocodile-esque. But I can only sculpt like 3 or 4 at a time before I have to have a break, because there's so much detail that goes into each scale, and I don't know, it's just a very slow process even though there's such small areas and it feels like you're getting nowhere. But the outcome is just stunning by the end. It's well worth our while, it just takes forever. So this middle back piece was actually quite a different piece from what the hypos usually have. It was like smaller scales, not really the individual long scale it has. Different pattern altogether. Really cool, and it was a nice change up from the rest of them. Not 100% sure if I captured it properly, but I hope I did. I hope I did it justice. So we're getting there, slowly. Still got that whole tail and the butt area to go. Of course, I use my toothbrush a lot through this process just to give it a nice texture and uneven, chaotic texture to it. Now the slow process of back down the back and up the tail. I should say I only sculpt to the edge of the butt, and then I start at the end of the tail and then sculpt towards the butt that way. That way the scales have that one on top of each other effect. I'm not sure if I'm describing that right, but you'll get what I mean when I get to that part. So here, yep, I've started at the tip of the tail, and now I'm stacking the different scales on top of each other one at a time. Ever so slightly, so it gets that stacking effect that the design calls for. It was actually really fun following the curvature of this tail and making sure that I kept all the different spikes in alignment to where they should be. It was really fun. So yes, as though this video is sped up and it looks like I powered through this tail really quickly, this took me hours and hours because I could only sculpt 4 pieces at a time and then Had to have a break for 2 hours to let them set hard enough to be able to sculpt the next few parts. I do this so I don't bump the previous parts and wreck a whole section. So I only do them in tiny sections so I don't wreck the previous section, if that makes sense. But yes, it's a very slow process. Well worth it though. Okay, time for second question of the day. What is the biggest achievement you have overcome when making videos? That's probably just making videos in general and having the confidence to put them up. I suffer from imposter syndrome a fair bit, so having my videos online and listening to my voice and watching my hands in the camera or my face is very cringy to me and I hate it, but I'm getting better. I'm getting better. So close to being fully sculpted, so close. Just re-watching this again, I just remember how long it took me. Hypo scales just take so long. Purely because I have to sculpt them in little bits at a time. Here I'm sculpting the final part. I can finally see the end. And there we have it, it's fully sculpted. Time to base coat and see if my sculpting actually worked. And yes, I'm quite happy with it. Now painting. So I'm starting off with a Jo Sonja Burnt Sienna. Nice reddy brown. So I want this to be my undertone for everything but the back scales. And yes, Jo Sonja is a lovely paint. It's my go-to when Citadel is unavailable. Which has been a bit hard to get in the current climate of the world. Now I'm using a Jo Sonja Golden Brown. Forgot the name of it, but I'm just dry brushing that into certain areas. Following the reference very closely here, but it's kind of hard because I only have one reference of the Hyper Dilo, so I sort of have to guess a lot of it. And assume that these lighter browns are not just light effects, that it's actually a part of it. It's hard when you don't get to see them in actual movement. You don't get to see how the light affects the skin. So now I'm coming in with my citadels in a very dark brown, and it's almost black, and I'm going over the back scales. And I'll also be dry brushing it in certain areas and doing the little spots. So here you can see that I'm dry brushing just like different darker shadowed areas, and also around the feet and the hands. Now I'm coming in with my Elder Pablo Black, just to dry brush it in different areas to give it more depth. And I'll also be using this to paint the claws. So now I'm coming in with some lighter browns and greys just to touch up the different areas that the Hyper Dilo seems to have in a lighter colour. Again, I'm not 100% sure if all of these are just light effects or are actually part of it. I know the tail has stripes, but the rest of it I'm not sure if it's just lighting effects or if it actually has those colours. But I like the idea that it has those colours. So now I'm using my Citadel Pink to paint the inside of the mouth, or start the painting of the inside of the mouth. Now I'm coming in with a pale grey and a nice Jo Sonja cream, and I'll dry brush, or sorry, I should say a wet brush over the wet pink paint inside the mouth to give my inner mouth effect. It's kind of hard to explain, but it really works wonders on painting the inside of the mouth. Now I'm using my high flow acrylic to paint the teeth. I know a lot of people say don't paint teeth white, but I paint them white and then I come in with a brown wash to make them more realistic. So I'm using white as my base coat for the teeth. And that's my brown wash. I'm going to cover the whole creature in the brown wash. This will bring out the shadows. And also bring out a more natural look. And this is why I don't paint the teeth anything but white, because this wash will make them a bit more of a natural tone. And of course my wash is from Citadel. Now the fun part of the base. So I'm just tracing around all the different parts that will be going in. Yes, I'll be covering them with clay later on, but this is just so in my mind I can set everything in place and envision what I'm doing. So Scope asked for me to sculpt Golf Pond. So my base is not big enough to do all of Golf Pond, so I'm sort of taking elements of it and sculpting it in. So I'm taking the main part, which is the waterfall, and I've shrunken it right down. Well, in theory I've shrunken it right down, and hopefully the Dilo doesn't look oversized right beside it, but we'll see how it looks in the end. So I'm using tinfoil as the bulk of the base, and I'll be using my bacon bond as a coverage for the base to adhere the clay to the base in the tinfoil. This is a glue that, well, sets once it's baked in the oven. But it's also quite sticky, so it holds the clay to the base while I'm working with it. So now I've run my Super Sculpey through the pasta maker into these thin sheets, and I'm laying them over the base. Now I'm just smoothing it all out so I can commence sculpting the base. Just impressing the plaque in again so I can get the exact measurements of it. And I'll be cutting out that little area because I don't need it to be that risen above the rest of the base. Now I'm tracing in where I kind of want the pond to go. And I'm carving all the pond area out to make it deeper than the rest of the base. Now I'm impressing my sculpture in just to get the feet and print of where it's going to be standing and make it easier to glue it in later. Now I'm using my references of Gulf Pond and sculpting in the main features around the waterfall. So it has this like pier rock with these flat edges to it that I'm currently sculpting in, and then the other side has this kind of pride rock from Lion King look to it, so I'll be sculpting that in later. Now I'm coming in with tinfoil and giving it a nice rocky texture, and I'll also be doing that to the ground around to give my Mod Podge later on something to grip to. So now I'm using my bacon bond again. I'm going around all the edges just to help the clay glue to the base, as well as gluing the 2-part epoxy rocks down. And now it's time to bake. Quite happy with it. So now I'm coming in with some Jo Sonja Burnt Sienna, and this will be my base colour for the base. I usually paint green under where the grass will go, but this time I wanted it to look a bit more muddy and a bit more wet, as if it just rained. So now I'm coming in with a golden brown from Jo Sonja, and I'm doing the river edge. River edge? Pond edge. There is a big difference between a river and a pond. And you can see that I'm sort of dappling the effect. It's not really dry brushing, it's not really painting normal, it's a sort of dappling sort of effect. And I'm coming in with a more golden tone brown as well, and doing the same thing of a dappling effect. This gives a really natural look. So now I'm coming in with some paperbark grey. Now here's where I found it really hard, because the water in the aisles is not see-through, it's got like a grey tone. So I sort of started painting the river and wasn't quite sure how to go about it. So I just went to painting my Hallcraft grey all over the rocks. If you do ever paint with Hallcraft, it's quite a thick paint, so it's one I actually have to water down before I can use it on my sculpt. So here I am trying to figure out how to do this water effect from the aisles, because it looks natural, but it's not, because water's transparent and the aisles water is not transparent. So I'm trying to figure out here how to make it work with a natural look, but also look like the water from the aisles, so it kind of looks like Gulf Pond. I'm not sure if I captured it in the end, but let me know if I did. So here I'm coming in with a Citadel dark blue to try and be my undertone. And I'm coming with a brown wash just over my rocks now. And of course the wash is from Citadel. And I'll do this around the river edge as well to bring out those shadows and depth to it. So now I'm sort of dappling some light grey in. Still wasn't happy with the look of it by this point. So I just decided to paint the base black while I had to think about how to do the water. So this is my Elder Pablo black. It's a nice thick black paint. So now I'm doing a blue wash over the water to see if that helps. And it did help, but it also gave me an idea of how to move forward. So I'm coming in with my Mod Podge now because I decided to skip ahead and do the grass. Sorry it's not very in alignment with each other, but I'm trying to show you the way I work. While I need to think about something, I sort of leave it and then start on a different area and have a think. So now I'm just sprinkling my turf all over the Mod Podge to create the grass effect. This is my own personal mixture of terrain grass. So now I'm using my sponge and I'm sponging in grey sort of dappled areas. It's starting to give the effect I was looking for. I'm coming with an even lighter grey here and just giving even more of a streaky effect. Now I'm coming in with my gold leaf paint and I'm painting in my little logo, or my signature I should say. Now I'm coming with a base green for the moss. I'll also be doing some terrain turf, but more of a mossy terrain turf over this green area where the moss will go. As you can see here, I'm adding the Mod Podge to that area and I'll be sprinkling my little bit of moss to the top of it. You can see this is more of a fluffy green here rather than the rocky grass below. And now it's UV resin time. So I'm just pouring out the resin throughout the pond and I'm using the nozzle of it to push it around. Since UV resin is quite a thick resin, it can seem to hold its shape in a bubble effect unless you actually smooth it all out. If that makes sense at all, I hope it makes sense. And now I'm using like a thin clear cord for sewing and I'm super gluing it into the mouth of the Hyper Dilo. I'm doing this to start building the armature for the spitting net effect that Tapwing's Hyper Dilo does. And now I'm just adding some glue to where the feet imprints are and I'll be super gluing the sculpture down. Now I'm just cutting those cords to size and I'll be pushing them and inserting them into the resin before the resin is set. And then I'll be setting the resin and holding the cords in place while the resin sets. You can see I'm using my UV torch here to set the resin. Now the fun part. So here I'm dribbling resin down the cords as the resin is being set by the UV torch. It's a really satisfying thing to watch happen and it's really effective. Essentially creates these really cool saliva dribbles or nets, as it were. Now I'm going to be using my clear silicone to start building the waterfall. I'll just be using my spatula here to smooth the waterfall out and spread it into the areas I need it to be, and then I'll be using other tools to sort of shape the water how I need it. You can see I'm using a brush here to sort of create splash effects with the silicone. Now I'm going to be using some Mod Podge and I'll be placing this liberally over the surface of the resin, and then I'll be using a straw to blow on it to create the ripple effects of the water. You can see here is where I start blowing on the resin, or the Mod Podge, to create those nice ripples. Now I'm using some ultra matte white and I'm sort of dry brushing that into different areas to create a more fast moving look to the water. So now I'm coming in with some Liquitex high gloss varnish, sorry. And I'll be brushing this over the whole thing to make sure the white that I just dry brushed is still glossy. And that's Scope's sculpture of the Hyper Dilophosaurus all done. I really hope he likes it, and I really hope if Tapwing sees this that she likes it too. I'm really happy with the spitty net effect of this guy, and I really like how it turned out. So there we have it. And I'll see yous all in the next one. Bye!